agradecer ao professor Zorzo, o professor Vânia aí, do local aqui no UFSCar, desse vídeo, né? O Bruno Souza, né? Mais uma vez a gente está ali, né? Participando de caravana, né? Já há 20 dias e tantos outros eventos, né? Ao Fernando da Monitora, né? Que deu apoio ali para fazer a divulgação, enfim, a Monitora ali que vocês conheceram na parte da manhã. Vou colocar aqui um novo lab também, né, que prestigiou. E também é para a minha família, né, que as nossas famílias, né, que cederam a gente, né, para estar aqui, né. E só assim, né, a localização, nós temos aqui em São Carlos, por onde está para frente de Rio Preto, né. Foi ali que há 14 anos atrás nasceu um pequeno grupo, né. Esse grupo ele acabou aí se expandindo, né. A gente tem Angola, tudo até parte do mundo, né? Isso é uma história muito louca que a gente tem. E hoje, aqui embaixo, né, nós temos 1.394 membros. Né? Uma comunidade que já fez muitos eventos, né? Participou de segundas de computação, cursos, workshop. O mais recente aqui foi do próprio Fernando da Micali, JavaMan, JUG TOUR, Java, 21 dias, né? E é dia de Java, perdeu. A gente já participou também, né? E é um grupo assim que sempre está fazendo parceria, né, com outros JUGs, né? No caso sou Java, Java Bahia, hoje Java Santa Catarina, VF JUG. E a gente tem aí a nossa página no Facebook para participar. Tem aí o Twitter, né, para vocês poderem participar. Na nossa parte do grupo lá do Google para se cadastrar. Né? E hoje a gente vai ter aí 3 palestras. Né? Vamos iniciar aí com o Glenda, depois o Bruno Souza, né? E finalizando com o Bruno Souza. Né? Não vou mais delongar, porque já estamos já com o horário, né? Já adiantado aí. Com vocês, tem uma salva de palmas aqui para o Helder.
Boa tarde. Quem almoçou? Quem não almoçou? A gente quase não almoçou. Estou entrevistando, todo mundo almoçou. Então vamos lá, gente. Bom, primeira coisa, obrigado pelo convite, obrigado pelo local, obrigado à faculdade. É sempre um prazer de poder estar aqui para conversar um pouco, falar de tecnologia, falar de coisas legais. E chacoalhou aqui um pouco. Então, bom, vamos falar, meu nome é Helder, trabalho na Oracle, sou evangelista ou advocate, como você quiser. A gente vai conversar um pouco hoje sobre gerenciamento de transações em ambientes distribuídos. Então, vamos direto ao ponto. Todo funcionário da Oracle tem que mostrar esse slide, né? Só para nós falar que não tem nenhuma obrigação contratual, nada comercial relacionado a essa conversa. É realmente uma conversa. Bom, gente, ambientes distribuídos. Né? A abordagem distribuída que mais se fala hoje em dia são microserviços. Né? Microserviços, no fim das contas, nada mais é do que um grande ambiente distribuído, uma grande arquitetura distribuída. Então, primeiro vamos pensar um pouco assim, rapidamente, né? Por que é interessante, por que é importante, por que a gente deveria se importar, deveria pensar em microserviços para o nosso projeto, para a nossa carreira, para a nossa equipe, etc. Tem uma lei de Common, né, que é chamada, que diz o seguinte, né, esse cara, ele fala, olha, organizações que fazem software, que desenham sistemas, elas são praticamente obrigadas a entregar um software que reflete diretamente a forma com que eles se comunicam internamente. Tá? Em outras palavras, a forma com que você se comunica dentro da sua empresa influencia diretamente o software que você entrega. Influencia diretamente a arquitetura que você entrega. Tá? E você está praticamente fadado a isso. Tá bom? E aí essa lei vai demonstrar por quê. E baseado nisso, você fala o seguinte, bom, se a forma com que eu me comunico reflete a forma com que eu entrego o software, E depois eu olho para o microserviço e falo assim, poxa, por que eu estou fazendo microserviço? Se eu estou fazendo. Muitas vezes a gente está em eventos e as pessoas veem, olha, eu tenho um monolito aqui, eu quero mudar para microserviço. Eu pergunto por quê? Porque eu quero escalar. Você quer escalar só o software, mas por quê? Né? Você começa a tentar entender melhor o que a pessoa está querendo realmente fazer e você percebe o seguinte, microserviços, ele é primeiro para escalar pessoas e não software. Por quê? A gente estava até agora há pouco lá na Monitora, conversando com o pessoal, e aí eles estavam comentando que, poxa, hoje você tem tanta coisa para aprender, tem tanta coisa para estudar, e aí o full stack hoje ele tem que saber Java, JavaScript, Node, Python, DevOps, engenharia, banco, no 5.5, é tanta coisa que ele tem que fazer que, na verdade, você não escala o indivíduo. Quanto mais a equipe, quanto mais o software. E esse é um dos pontos de microserviços. E eu vou mostrar aqui. Estou pondo várias premissas para a gente fechar todas as análise. Uma outra lei atrelada a microserviços, que já ouviu falar na lei das duas pizzas. Diz a lenda, tá, que a primeira pessoa a dizer, ou enfim, a se manifestar sobre isso foi o Jeff Bezos, da Amazon. E o que é a lei das duas pizzas dentro da Amazon? É o seguinte, nenhum time dentro da Amazon pode ser tão grande que ele não seja alimentado por até duas pizzas. Então, não vale comer as duas sozinhas. Eu como uma, por exemplo, você come outra coisa não. Em média, os times lá têm 10, 12 pessoas. Tá? Nenhuma reunião pode acontecer lá se ela não puder ser alimentada por até duas pizzas. Por que isso, gente? Times menores, times mais enxutos, tendem a ter maior agilidade de comunicação. E o ponto essencial, seja na Amazon, seja na Netflix, seja no Spotify, seja em qualquer empresa, qualquer case, grande case de sucesso de microserviço, que é as equipes, cada equipe é responsável por um microserviço, por um serviço, e ela é dona dele. Ela define a tecnologia, ela define o banco, ela define a API do microserviço. Ela é realmente dona, ela é o owner do projeto, do microserviço. Por que isso? Vou falar um caso, por exemplo, da Netflix. A última vez que eu vi, a Netflix tinha em torno de 1.200 microserviços no ar, sem contar cluster nada, tá? Microserviços individualmente trabalhando. Se cada equipe é dona de um microserviço, você tem no mínimo, tá? Chutando baixo, talvez uma equipe cuide de mais um, você tem no mínimo 1.000 equipes. 10 a 12 pessoas, estou falando aí de 10 a 12 mil pessoas trabalhando. Você imagina, gente, 1.000 times trabalhando junto, e eu tenho que toda hora ir na mesa do fulano e falar assim, fulano, o que acontece quando não? Lógico, eventualmente você vai ter que fazer. Mas se toda hora você tiver que ficar pedindo a bênção para os outros, precisar ficar arquitetando tudo, isso não escala. Esse tipo de comunicação não escala. Por isso que a ideia é que os times sejam autônomos. Que uma vez combinado a comunicação, combinado a API, isso possa ser feito de forma individual entre os times. O Martin Fowler escreveu um artigo bem interessante sobre microserviços, a URL está ali, quem quiser olhar depois. E ele faz a comparação exatamente da lei de Cohen aplicada nos dois universos, seja do monolito, seja de microserviços. No monolito, ele diz que o monolito é gerado por uma abordagem que é chamada de os times organizados em silos. Tá? Então, por exemplo, aqui no slide, ele fala o seguinte, olha, você tem lá um time cuidando de front-end, você tem um time cuidando de middleware, né, serviço, etc. E você tem um time cuidando de banco de dados, DBS. Qual que é a saída natural desse modelo? É DBA entregando banco de dados, né? Tabela, script, space, etc. O pessoal de middleware entregando seus middleware, seus serviços. O pessoal de front-end entregando obviamente front-end. Parece até óbvio, né? Mas a questão é, esses times juntos, eles só conseguem entregar os seus blocos, né, monolíticos mesmo, só que de cada um desses pontos. Que é o que eles chamam de realmente as arquiteturas organizadas em ciclos. Comparando isso com o modelo que resulta em microserviços, é o que eles chamam de times multifuncionais. Lembra que eu falei agora? Poxa, hoje cada vez mais o cara tem que saber um monte de coisa. Por que se ao invés de ele ter que saber um monte de coisa, todo mundo tem que saber tudo na empresa, por que eu não posso ter pessoas especialistas em certos assuntos trabalhando juntos, assuntos diferentes? Então eu posso ter, por exemplo, aqui, o cara que é de banco de dados, trabalhando com a outra pessoa que é de front-end, e trabalhando junto com a pessoa que é de middle. Esse pessoal junto, trabalhando, cada um na sua especialidade, a saída natural disso, pela lei de Cohen, são unidades de software muito menores, que nelas tem tudo, tem o front-end, tem o middle, tem o banco de dados, o que mais for necessário, e extremamente especializadas. Tá? São entregas de software baseadas em capacidades, em habilidades do software. Tá? Então, é o que eles chamam de modelo cross-functional, né? De time multidisciplinar. Vamos dizer assim. Tá? Gente, é isso aqui que a gente fala de escalar a forma de comunicar o time. Tá? Dessa forma aqui, os times conseguem ter mais autonomia e escalar muito mais o próprio trabalho. E aí, quando a gente está falando de transação, né, a transação ela tem muito a ver com dados. Né? No fundo, a gente transaciona para lidar com os dados, seja a forma que você estiver armazenando ou atualizando esse dado, ou trabalhando com ele, etc. Então, no modelo de ciclos, né, tradicional, a saída natural, né, lembra que eu falei dos DBAs todos trabalhando juntos? A saída natural é um banco monolítico, onde você tem lá todos os seus trabalhos. Ao passo que no modelo, né, cross-functional, lembra que eu falei? Cada time ele é autônomo e ele é o dono do sistema ao ponto de ele poder escolher a tecnologia que ele vai usar, tá? Que for melhor, o que ele preferir, etc. Então, a saída natural disso é que cada microserviço tem o seu próprio banco de dados. Tá? Então, o Vinícius encontra na palestra e falou assim, olha, tem duas coisas que você não compartilha com ninguém na vida. Escova de dente e banco de dados. Tá? Então, no caso de microserviços, isso é muito verdade, não compartilhe banco de dados. E aí você vai olhar ali no fundo e fala assim, não, mas aqueles dois estão compartilhando. Na verdade, se dá para ver o íconezinho no meio, é o mesmo microserviço, só que está num cluster. Então, na verdade, você só tem compartilhamento quando é o mesmo microserviço. Tá? Entre microserviços diferentes, você não compartilha, que é um pattern conhecido como database per service. Tá? Uma das boas práticas de microserviço. Não vou entrar a fundo em banco de dados, tá? Mas relacionado a sistemas distribuídos. Mas se alguém quiser, tem esse livro show de bola do SVNL. Tá? Depois eu passo para o pessoal a apresentação, quem quiser dar uma olhada. Ele está de graça no online, o e-book, ou tem impresso. Então, legal. Eu falei de transações, né? De eventos distribuídos. Por que a gente transaciona? Por que a gente precisa de transação? Não só em eventos distribuídos. Por que a gente precisa de transação em sistemas? Para a gente ter consistência no meu dado. Tenho lá os dados e minha base de dados, eu preciso que eles sejam consistentes. Né? Não assim. Assim não está consistente. Então, assim, nos bancos relacionais, né, até então, a gente falava assim, muito quando falava de transação, no modelo ACE. Então, só recapitulando, o que é o modelo ACE? Quer dizer que uma transação ela precisa ter 4 propriedades: atomicidade, consistência, isolamento e durabilidade. O que é isso? Atomicidade se a sua transação tiver 1, 2, 10 mil passos, todos os passos têm que ser completados com sucesso. Se um deles falhar, você volta tudo ao estado original. Consistência, o que é? O seu banco, os seus dados ali, eles têm uma consistência. Eles têm que ter uma integridade relacional, eles têm que ter consistência de acordo com o seu negócio. A sua transação tem que respeitar e garantir que isso seja mantido. Isolamento, o que é? Se eu tiver múltiplas transações no meu banco acontecendo ao mesmo tempo, elas não podem interferir no dado que as outras estão atualizando ou incluindo, etc. ao mesmo tempo. Então, cada transação tem um raio de ação isolado umas das outras. E a outra durabilidade, que é, ao fim da transação, o meu dado tem que estar persistindo no banco. Simples assim. Tá? Voltamos de novo ao ambientes distribuídos. Né? Eu falei que cada serviço vai ter seu banco de dados individual, separadinho, etc. Ou seja, o padrão ACID em microserviços, em ambientes distribuídos, tá? Ele é assim, em ambiente distribuído, se você tiver o mesmo banco, por exemplo, você fez lá um cluster de bancos Oracle, SQL Server, etc. As máquinas estão em ambiente distribuído. Nesse caso, você ainda pode contar com transações. É um parto, mas funciona. No ambiente distribuído, como os que a gente está trabalhando hoje em dia, especialmente na abordagem de serviços, você tem bancos de diferentes tecnologias, isso é impossível. Porque começa do ponto que a tecnologia pode ser diferente. Eles podem estar em redes diferentes, às vezes em vendas diferentes, tá? Um na versão também. Então assim, esquece. Não dá para você contar com isso em ambientes distribuídos no padrão de hoje, tá? Podemos compartilhar. Mas ainda assim, você precisa dos resultados que o modelo IST te traria. Né? Você precisa ter, de certa forma, a atomicidade, você precisa ter, com certeza, a consistência, você precisa ter a durabilidade, você também deveria ter o isolamento. Então, tem alguma forma de fazer isso? E aí, uma das respostas, né, e é a minha favorita, e é uma das coisas que eu acho mais legal na nossa área, é que às vezes a gente faz um negócio hoje, que é até interessante, mas às vezes você vê um resultado muito limitado. E daí um tempo você fala, nossa, era isso. Né? Esse é um caso desse. Esse é um paper que foi escrito por Princeton em 1987, tá? 30 anos atrás. Falando sobre um negócio chamado sagas. Tá? Na época, claro, teve sua aplicação, né? Mas no ambiente distribuído que a gente tem hoje, isso faz muito sentido. Um dos pontos essenciais de sagas é o que a gente chama de transações de compensação. Então vamos lá. Quando você está num banco, né, convencional, digamos assim, falei da transação, né, que ela é atômica, então tem lá o espaço, então aí faz o rollback. Então no ambiente distribuído a gente já sabe que eu não tenho rollback, porque eu não consegui começar uma transação. O que é a transação de compensação? Ela não vai desfazer algo que foi feito em caso de erro. Ela vai compensar os efeitos daquilo que foi feito. Exemplo, caixa eletrônica. Você foi lá sacar dinheiro, foi lá no caixa, digitou sua senha, quero R$100. O caixa vai bater na sua conta, tem saldo? Tem saldo. Segundo passo, manda sair o dinheiro. O dinheiro foi sair, travou ali na saída da caixa eletrônica, deu erro. Então o que ele faz? O banco não vai desfazer os R$100 que ele já tirou da sua conta. Ele vai gerar uma transação de crédito daquilo que foi debitado. Não sei quantos já precisaram ligar no cartão de crédito e falar assim, tem uma transação aqui que eu não reconheço. Quem já precisou? O que aconteceu? O banco tirou a transação do seu cartão? Não, normalmente não. Ele gera uma outra transação do mesmo valor com um sinal invertido. Né? Acredita aquilo que foi feito antes. É isso que faz a transação de compensação. Então, qual que é o ponto isso quando a gente fala de ambientes distribuídos? É exatamente, por exemplo, se eu tenho uma transação de 4 passos, fiz o passo 1, fiz o passo 2, deu erro no 3. Quando dá erro no 3, o que o 3, o que a transação 3 vai fazer? Olha, chama a compensação C2, porque foi o passo que foi concluído até então. Aí ele compensa os T2. O T2 chama a compensação de C1, anula, compensa os efeitos relacionados, feitos por eu. Tá? Eu vou demonstrar isso, basicamente é isso. E é assim, você tem duas formas de fazer isso. Tá? E aí é uma coisa interessante, porque a gente fala, o sagas é um pattern, né? Só que tem duas formas de você aplicar o pattern, que também são formas de patterns, que é o seguinte. Uma delas é o próprio serviço, né? O próprio... Pense que cada um desses espaços é um serviço. Então, pode ser um endpoint. Uma das formas de você implementar isso é o próprio serviço, o próprio passo, por exemplo, o T2, ele saber, olha, se eu falhar, eu tenho que chamar esse cara aqui para compensar. Porque eu sei quem veio antes de mim. É o teu. Isso é um jeito de fazer? Funciona? Funciona. Qual que é o problema? Pode ser que o T2 ali seja uma funcionalidade extremamente coringa no seu sistema, que precisa ser usada em vários lugares. Mas não necessariamente ele vai ser chamado sempre nessa mesma ordem, ou seja, não necessariamente ele sempre vai ter que chamar sempre. Se você está num ambiente desse, o código de T2 começa a ficar muito complexo. Porque vai falar, puxa, num cenário tem que chamar um, num cenário tem que chamar outro, num cenário tem que chamar outro. Se esse é o caso, aí existe uma outra boa prática dentro de sagas, que é o seguinte, você ter o que a gente chama de transação orquestradora, ou serviço orquestrador. O que é isso? É um serviço em cima de todos esses, que esse serviço sabe a ordem exatamente de que eles têm que ser chamados, e em caso de erro de cada um, quais são as compensações que têm que ser chamadas. Ou seja, se eu tenho T2 ali, que pode ser útil em diversos cenários, Eu posso ter uma orquestração em um cenário, uma outra orquestração em outro cenário, uma outra orquestração em outro cenário, e o código de T2 é sempre o mesmo. Ou seja, estou diminuindo o acoplamento da minha aplicação, estou melhorando a reusabilidade do meu código. Esse é um código que pode ser, a manutenção dele era muito mais simples, muito mais, tem uma longevidade maior. O código dura mais, né, na versão dele, etc. Tá? Então, essas são duas formas de você gerenciar. Agora sim, vocês devem estar pensando, poxa, isso é legal, isso ajuda, mas aumenta a complexidade do meu código. Sim, aumenta a complexidade do meu código. Tá? Por isso que a gente fala assim, não é para sair fazendo, aplicando as coisas legais para qualquer coisa. Tem que ver se aquilo realmente é necessário. E aí você aplica, certo? Aquela história da bala de prata. A bala de prata, tem nada que só resolve todos os problemas. Então assim, como a complexidade aumenta, seria interessante você ter algo que ajuda a facilitar isso. Seria algo que você consegue fazer na mão, tudo isso que você consegue fazer na mão. Tá? Mas pode aumentar bastante a complexidade do seu código. Existem várias formas de você atacar isso com framework, com ferramenta. Eu vou mencionar uma e vou demonstrar outra. Tá? Uma delas, quem já mexeu com a faixa de campo? Já mexeram com saga dentro do campo? A partir de 2 versões atrás, ele passou a ter implementação de saga dentro do próprio ambiente. Dá um ponto saga lá, ele tem lá toda a implementação. E é onde você consegue redirecionar o fluxo mesmo. Olha, se estiver indo por aqui, ok, você chama isso aqui. Se tiver um erro, tem exceção, direciona para o outro lado. Uma outra forma interessante é através de um projeto chamado FN. Já ouviu falar de FN? Não? O que é FN? Tá? Eu vou falar rapidamente e vou mostrar para vocês, porque ele está correto. Ele é uma plataforma para serverless. O que é serverless? Rapidamente. Não é ausência de servidor, né? O nome sugira, mas é você abstrair do desenvolvedor a camada de servidor. Tá? O desenvolvedor ele não precisa ser mais consciente ou ter aquela ligação, aquele apego com o servidor. Eu trabalhei numa empresa que as pessoas davam nomes carinhosos para o servidor. Tinha o Bob, tinha o Johnny, tinha a Mariazinha e tal. Então, lá embaixo da mesa, você sabe onde está. Sabe esse apelo que a gente tem, assim, você saber o URL do servidor, você tinha a porta, você abriu só para você? Então, no ambiente serverless, isso não existe. Você abstrai dos desenvolvedores totalmente e delega, pode ser para um vendor, pode ser para a equipe de operações que está cuidando da sua nuvem interna, o que for, etc. Mas a verdade é, você desenvolvedor, eu desenvolvedor, a gente vai fazer o melhor código possível e alguém vai cuidar da infraestrutura. Basicamente é isso. Eu não sei se meu código está rodando num cluster, não sei quanto de memória tem de máquina, não sei o que você vai mudar. Eu sei o seguinte, ele está lá rodando, eu preciso dele, ele funciona. Rapidamente, eu não vou entrar muito em detalhe de service, o FN ele é open source, então o que é legal de ser open source? Você pode contribuir no projeto, você pode baixar na sua máquina e testar, como eu vou fazer agora, um pouco para vocês. E o fato de você poder rodar na sua máquina, ele te dá uma possibilidade muito interessante, que é você rodar em local aquilo que estaria na nuvem, exatamente a mesma plataforma, exatamente o mesmo código, o mesmo comportamento. Né? Às vezes o comportamento muda por conta de problema da máquina e tal, mas a funcionalidade em si é a mesma. Então, por exemplo, você pode pegar essa plataforma e colocar no seu ambiente, no seu pipeline de teste, de desenvolvimento, e ter esse comportamento que você teria só em nuvem no seu local, na sua rede local, na sua máquina, no seu local. Então, isso é interessante. Uma coisa interessante sobre o FN, que ele é feito em cima do Docker, tá? E por ter nascido em cima de containers, ele de cara trouxe todas essas stacks suportadas dentro da plataforma originalmente. Ou seja, se você gosta de PHP, você pode usar FN. Se você gosta de Python, você pode usar FN. Tem mais linguagens, tá? Mas a que eu gosto, a que eu uso, não está aí. Beleza. É containers, é Docker. Ou seja, você pega o seu Dockerfile da sua ferramenta, da sua linguagem que você gosta, traz para dentro da plataforma, faz a implementação que você precisa e ele faz. Ele vai funcionar por ser feito assim. E agora vamos mostrar um pouquinho de ele funcionando. Eu vou precisar olhar para lá porque eu estou com problema de monitor. Vou mostrar o código. Bom, o código que ele vai rodar aqui é só para demonstrar para vocês como funciona o código. Sabe? Esse código aqui. Então, por exemplo, tem um módulo dentro da FM que chama FM Flow. Que ele vai gerenciar, lembra que eu falei da função que orquestra as execuções? Ele basicamente, você pega a partir da instância dele, a função que vai executar e ele consegue monitorar toda a cadeia de execução com um timestamp de cada uma, com um stack de erro, tudo isso, mesmo se for tecnologias diferentes, tá? Que é o caso aqui da Glenda. Então, por exemplo, o que ele está fazendo aqui? Ele pega uma instância do FM Flow, tá? Do Flow. Isso aqui me retorna um objeto de future, tá? Através do invoke da function. Ele me retorna aqui um completor future. Tá? A partir de Java 8 você consegue já usar o FM. Então ele está fazendo a chamada dos endpoints aqui, de cada uma das funções. Tá? E aqui embaixo, quando ele faz o compose, ele vai falar assim, olha, aqui eu estou simulando uma agência de viagem. Então imagina que eu tenho que fazer agendamentos de hotel, carro e avião. E eu falo o seguinte, olha, isso aqui é minha transação. Ou eu tenho os três ou eu não tenho nenhum. Tá? Então você está garantindo aqui. Então eu vou ter, uma vez que eu consegui executar o agendamento do avião, eu chamo o agendamento do hotel. Uma vez que eu fiz o hotel, eu chamo do carro. E se estiver tudo ok, eu mando um e-mail. Tá? Esse é o e-mail, e se der erro, tá? Cada um deles eu vou chamar o cancelamento, que é um outro endpoint, que eu falei, que é a transação e a compensação. Está composto ali, né? Então ele vai chamar em cadeia todo mundo que tinha sido executado até então. Tá? E aí, se der erro, ele vai mandar um e-mail. Vamos ver se eu consigo. Aqui é a tela do FM Flow, eu vou mostrar para vocês o acompanhamento dessa execução. Então ali, ó, ele está mostrando para vocês, eu tenho as três funções em andamento, ele está acompanhando cada uma delas. Ali você tem os eventos que estão acontecendo de forma síncrona, tá? Que é um future, né? Assim. Então ele vai acompanhando todo o fluxo de execução da função até ele se completar. Vai alguns segundos, então, o que é interessante dessa ferramenta do Flow? Porque, como eu disse, você aumenta muito a complexidade, você aumenta toda a parte de decisões, tudo aquilo que está acontecendo. Né? Chama esse primeiro, chama aquele, dá aí o outro, não dá. assim, o que o FN Flow ele vai te dar? Então, ele vai te mostrar exatamente a sequência das chamadas, ele vai te mostrar exatamente quanto tempo demorou cada uma delas. Então ele vai te permitir um debug maior. Então, por exemplo, pode ser que no caso aqui, tem uma função em Java, uma função em Grupo, uma função em Python, uma função em Java. Então eu consigo saber, olha, eu passei por essa função em Java que ela deu erro, ou a mesma coisa no Node, em todas as áreas. Ele consegue trabalhar isso de forma unificada. E por algum motivo ele gostava. Tá, então, só para vocês terem uma ideia do que ele for. Então, esse era o. Só demonstrando como é que estava acontecendo essa apresentação, a demo, né? E essa aqui é a função de orquestração. Então, ela está sendo monitorada por FN Flow, e você tem o fluxo de execução de todas as funções que ele chama. Bom, e aí a pergunta é, já no final, isso está pronto para produção? E aí a resposta é sim e depende. O sim é o seguinte. Quem conhece, ouviu falar do DevOps na conferência? Provavelmente a maior, uma das maiores conferências do mundo, né? Na Europa, muito mais. A empresa que faz o aplicativo do DevOps é a Glenda, que é de um blockchain, que é o Elon Musk, e o back-end da aplicação é feito todo em FN, uma infraestrutura que eles montaram. Por que eles montaram? Né? Aí vem outro lance que assim. O FN é um projeto que foi comprado, uma empresa que foi comprada pela Oracle, e a Oracle transformou ele num projeto open source. E, baseado nele, vai ser lançado o Oracle Functions, que é a solução da Oracle de serviços. Então, você tem hoje o Microsoft Functions, você tem a AWS Lambda, você tem o Google Functions, então vai ter o Oracle Functions. Vai ser baseado no FN, que vai lançar logo, não sei quando. Bom, gente, era isso. Queria só deixar meus contatos ali no Twitter. Eu lancei um livro ano passado, já veio 8, ganhei 2 prêmios por livro. Então, se alguém tiver interesse, está o URL do livro aí, se tiver alguma dúvida também. E eu acho que é isso. Tem tempo para perguntas? Uma pergunta?
Alguns slides para trás, você mostrou sobre o FN especificamente, que algumas funcionalidades escritas em linguagens diferentes. Né? Como que acontece esse interop? Essa função que eu escrevi em Ruby, ela é exposta de alguma forma via HTTP e o FN faz essa serialização dos parâmetros em bloco,
no momento que você faz o deploy de qualquer função em qualquer linguagem, o FN expõe ela como endpoint REST. Por isso, aquela demo que eu estava mostrando é exatamente isso. Todas as funções se comunicam via REST.
Então, imagino que deve ter alguma interface, algum protocolo que você, quando vai escrever essa função, você precisa seguir esse contrato, né? Sua função deve ter esses inputs, esses outputs, para que você consiga fazer com que ela entre nesse flow.
É um arquivo, um YAML bem simples, só falando assim, a tecnologia, o protocolo que ela está falando e qual que é a função de entrada. O resto do FN ele trata tudo por baixo do escopo.
Aí, não sei se dá tempo, eu posso conversar depois com você.
Claro,
eu só não entendi a motivação. Eu cheguei no meio da conversa, né? Eu peguei o problema. Mas assim, a motivação inicial era a gente estava no modelo de banco, né? Enfim, né? O ACID, e por necessidade seja de história, de processamento, eu precisei distribuir isso, né? E aí quando eu distribuo, eu tenho essa dificuldade de como que eu coordeno, eu entro com o FN, mas o FN não passa a ser o meu gargalo que eu já tinha lá atrás quando o banco era um só, ou seja, eu não estou simplesmente substituindo um gargalo por outro, porque se eu tenho esse orquestrador, ele passa ele passa a ser o gargalo, porque tudo vai ter que passar por ele, certo?
Tudo em arquitetura é um trade-off. Você tem que ver vantagens e desvantagens.
Exato. Então, a minha dúvida é o que eu ganho, né?
Sim.
Se eu não estou, porque, assim, eu saí de um modelo onde eu estou com tudo concentrado, porque ele virou um gargalo, e aí eu distribuí isso e novamente eu adicionei uma tecnologia que eventualmente pode se tornar gargalo de novo.
Sim. Vou te dar um exemplo de hoje, o FN ele já é integrado com o Kubernetes. Então, por exemplo, você pode ter o seu cluster Kubernetes com lá quantas máquinas forem necessárias e a plataforma roda em cima dele.
Mas o FN ele também tem um algoritmo de distribuição, porque assim, você pode ter vários serviços, mas se você tiver um orquestrador só, ele não conseguir lidar com as requisições.
Exatamente, porque o ponto do serverless é que você só instancia aquele serviço e o recurso utilizado para ele é sob demanda. Então, o serverless, esse é um dos pontos, até que não você podia entrar, mas você não paga por uptime de serviço no modelo serverless, você paga por consumo, por recurso consumido por execução. Tanto que normalmente você pega pacotes para de 1 milhão de execuções. Então é um modelo de arquitetura totalmente diferente de cobrança também. Mas assim, procura no final, gente. Acho que deu, né, gente? Obrigado de novo.
Salve de palmas para o Departamento, por favor.
Pessoal, queria só dar assim, né, uma rápida apresentação do Departamento. O Departamento é considerado um dos melhores palestrantes do mercado, né, sempre é premiado as 3, 4, às vezes as 5 melhores palestras do evento, são as dele. Ele foi um dos caras que... Você não precisa de tradução? Ah, você está usando para tradução? Não. Então acho que a gente não vai fazer tradução, porque só tinha 2 pessoas, você vai levantar muito. Quer assinar para cá e eu faço tradução? Pode assinar aqui. Tem mais alguém que precisa de tradução que não falou até agora e está com vergonha de dizer? Só não tenho certeza. Tem alguém que precisa de tradução? Não? Você não precisa. Então assim, você coloca uma cadeira aqui. Se você se manda. Eu vou precisar que você mande a câmera. Você está passando só aí. Ok, então, o Venkata é um dos principais palestrantes do mundo Java, né? Ele é um cara bastante conhecido no mundo ágil. Vou lá para mim, ele, por exemplo, escreveu um livro junto com o cara que escreveu o Manifesto Ágil, né? Então, é um palestrante fantástico, espero que vocês possam aproveitar bastante a oportunidade aí. Então, com vocês, o Sr. Venkata Vânia.
Well, thanks for coming here. Thanks for hosting me here. Thanks for organizing this wonderful event. I want to talk about how to be effective with evolution architecture. But I want to first start with a question for you all. What's architecture? That's exactly the first answer I get every single time I ask the question. What you told me is, architecture is something you can feel, but you cannot put into words. I love that definition. Thanks for sharing that. Let's try one more definition. What do you think is architecture? No, you cannot do the same answer again. Give it a try. Don't wait, you've got an hour. Yeah, go for it. Don't worry about being wrong. I'm wrong most of the time. Or at least my wife tells me that.
Is it the flow of how things should work?
Beautiful, right? It's a form. I love that word form, right? It is really a form of how things should work. Well, sure, but isn't that what design is as well? And now we think, okay, if that's what design is, then what's architecture? And then maybe we think, oh, architecture maybe is a bigger form than a design is. And do you ever feel confused defining what architecture is? If you are, then you are among the right people. If you're not thinking, right? So it's a very confusing term actually. And it's really hard to define what architecture really is. And just to give you an example of this, we all wonder what architecture is. There's a beautiful article, and I encourage every single person to read it. And this is a blog post, 3.5 pages long. It is called Who Needs, if I know how to type, let me try. Who Needs an Architect? And this is a little blog post, article written by Martin Fowler. And I won't spoil the thrill for you by saying what's in it. I want you to read it if you haven't had a chance to read it. But in this particular article, Martin Fowler talks about defining architecture. And one definition he gives is a definition he hates himself, and I hate as well. And the definition he gives is, architecture is a set of decisions that are really hard to change. Now the reason why that's a flawed definition is, we can create things that are hard to change, and then claim that we have created an architecture. But then he goes down and asks people what architecture is. But the best definition he gets from is from Ralph Johnson. And you remember who Ralph Johnson is? He's one of the authors of the famous Design Patterns book. And Ralph Johnson says, architecture is a shared understanding of the essential characteristics of a system. And what I love about this definition is the word shared understanding. Architecture is not something that should be hoarded by a small group of people. It should be something that everyone on the project should be really involved in carrying it through. So from that point of view, we want to be able to work on an architecture. But why should we really care about evolving architecture? So let's think about this for a little bit to see why we should evolve architecture. Now, we all work on software projects. Maybe we can agree to something. If you really think about software projects, if this is a timeline of a project, would you agree that this is really, when do we normally create architecture on a software project? When do we do that, generally speaking?
The beginning.
In the beginning. A lot of times in the beginning. Sometimes even before the beginning, isn't it? I once worked on a project where a client called me and said, we want you to create an architecture that will support concurrency and it should run on the cloud, they said. I said, oh, that's interesting. And they said, no, can you do it? I said, can you tell me a little bit about the project? And they said, we don't know. But it's got to support concurrency and it's got to be on the cloud, right? So sometimes we put the horse before the cars. We do this. So, in the beginning. But would you agree that on the timeline, this is a curve of the knowledge we have about a project. In the beginning, we don't know anything about the project. We think we know something, but not really. Towards the end, we pretty much know most of what we need to know. And right about that middle layer, about 40 to 50% into the project, is when things begin to make sense, isn't it? Now think about this for a minute. You are taking a project. Would you say architecture is important? Well, absolutely, it's extremely important. And now we are saying we will perform an action to perform what's really important in the beginning when we understand very little of the project we are actually creating. There's a name for this. This is called predictively irrational, right? And how do we expect to get better results when we try to do the most important aspect of a project when we understand the least about the project? So there's a very good reason why we should evolve architecture. But on the other hand, imagine you're an architect on a project. What do you get hired for as an architect? To create an architecture. Now, if you tell your boss, thanks for hiring me, I am not going to create architecture, but I'm going to wait until we are about halfway in the project for me to create architecture. That's a really easy way to get fired on the project, isn't it? So one of the things we need to have as an architect is a very important characteristic as a developer, which is called courage. we need to have the courage to really say, hey, come on, I cannot create an architecture when I don't have a clue what I'm doing. That doesn't mean we won't do anything. What if we create an architectural draft in the beginning? What if you put on the draft the percentage of your confidence on this? In the beginning, you are 10% confident. Right over here, maybe you are 90% confident. So if you can create an architecture of confidence and say how much confident you are, that gives an option for you to evolve this architecture as time goes on. Now obviously the question is, are there risks in what we do? Can you think of an activity which doesn't involve risk? Everything we do has risk in it, right? Well, but the question is, how do we manage those risks is the real question. Let's talk about why we should evolve. We did. Let's talk about the risk of evolving and the risk of not evolving as well. So let's talk about the risk of not evolving. What if we don't evolve architecture? If we don't evolve architecture, we sit down and create an architecture. And then we tell the entire team, that's our architecture, go build it. Now, one of the biggest risks of doing this is the architecture becomes very irrelevant to the project very quickly. Now, either the team is really capable to challenge the architect and say, that doesn't make sense, we have to change it. Or in a lot of teams, the architect being the overpowering person tells what to be built, and the team quietly goes and builds it, and the application ends up failing. Or alternatively, the team could really ignore the architect and go on to build whatever they want to build. And you see, there are some architects who really trouble me. These architects draw beautiful, pretty pictures, but they never write code. They never look at code. There is a special name for those kind of architects. They are called as PowerPoint architects. These are dangerous people because they can only draw pretty pictures. They cannot get anything useful done. And you know who these people are when you see them, right? They will draw these pictures, and before anything useful gets done, they quit and leave to another company to be a PowerPoint architect over there. And when the PowerPoint architect walks into the building or the room, the programmers who are busy writing code immediately will shut down the monitor and look at the pictures on the wall and say, that's a wonderful architecture. So in this case, the architecture doesn't serve the team also, unfortunately. So one of the biggest problems of not evolving architecture is irrelevance. And what we do becomes totally irrelevant to the project in one way or the other. But let's not be naive about it. There's a risk for evolving it as well. Just because we're going to evolve it doesn't mean everything will work just fine. But one of the biggest problems with evolving the architecture is, what if the architecture we are evolving does not meet the demands of the application as we move forward? What if we are into the 7th or the 8th sprint, and suddenly we come across a particular feature and we realize that it will be expensive to really implement this feature, and as a result the architecture is failing on us? How do we deal with it? Well, the answer to that question is to really think about prioritization. Well, let's think of features really quickly. There are two kinds of features that we should really tackle with. One is a planned feature, and the other is a surprise feature. Now, what's a planned feature? A planned feature is in your project backlog. These are the things that are in the works. You're planned for it, you're going to implement it on your project, and you know it's coming. Then there are those things that are called the surprise features. Your marketing team is out in a conference, they are looking at a competition's product, and they make the frantic call to your office saying, we just saw a feature they are working on, we are dead if we don't do this. And we should implement this feature too, and you never planned for it before. Now, the cool thing about this is, when you look at a planned feature, how do you really tackle those things? Well, the worst way to plan a project is to take all your backlog and just divide it into pieces and say, we're going to solve this in this particular sprint. Instead, take your stories, the story S1, S2, S3, all the way up to Sn, but take these stories and put a number on these. One number could be based on the most important thing, which is business value. So what is the business value of a user story? If your business value is very high, you want to do that story really early. If a particular story has very limited business value, yeah, it's useful, but it's not a do or die kind of a feature. The next thing to consider is, what about the architectural impact of this particular story? So when you look at a feature itself, you can ask the question, what is the architectural impact? So if a particular feature is going to require quite a bit of architectural work, maybe you need to implement a messaging tier for this particular feature, then I would say the architectural impact is very high. On the other hand, some features may have a fairly low impact on architectural needs. So once you consider these things, you want to prioritize your stories based on the most important and the most impactful first. And the least important and the least impactful comes later. Now, if you take your sprints, in the first 1 or 2 sprints, you're going to be doing what's extremely important and impactful, and you're going to postpone not so important and not so impactful things to a later time. Which means you are in the 7th sprint, you look at a particular planned feature, and it doesn't quite fit into what you have, but guess what? Hey, it's less important than what you have already done. We can compromise a lot more on this because what came before is more important than this one itself. And besides, because these are planned features, you can always look ahead for the impact, and that's how these impacts are being derived at, so that mitigates your risk quite a bit. Hey, but what about those surprise features? Well, here's the beauty of surprise features. Surprise features don't come to you and ask you, are you a waterfall project? Oh, then we will leave you alone. And if you're evolutionary and agile, we'll come and bother you. Surprise features are going to come about no matter which one you take. But the point really is, the principles we're going to talk about for the remainder of the session will help us to see how we could handle these surprise features as much as these planned features as well. So what are the things we can do to really minimize these things? But before we do this, let's talk about waterfall approach. What did we do in the waterfall approach? I started programming about 35 years ago. And in the beginning, my job was programming for the waterfall projects. I just didn't know this. And I used to work in companies, and what they would do is they would have 3 weeks when we would do nothing. No coding, nothing. And you go into a room like this, and you sit down for the 9 hours, and somebody, a domain expert, will come and talk about what the feature should be. And for 3 weeks, you just listen to them. Take notes all the time. And then at the end of the 3 weeks, you're supposed to analyze and then design. And programming will start sometime in the future. Now, this was a lot of fun time because you can go to work and not do any work, right? And the boss will come around, and what I liked about this thing was, for those 3 weeks, they will give you food at work. You had good breakfast, really good lunch, and they will come to you in the evening and say, we are running late today, can you stay behind? And you say yes, and they will bring dinner to you as well. And at the end of the 3 weeks, my boss will come to you and say, how was it? And I would say, it was amazing. And the boss will ask me, did you gain anything in those 3 weeks? And I would often say, I think I did. And the boss would say, not the food you had, but the concepts and the domain knowledge. And I would say, oh, sorry, I don't remember most of this anymore, right? And that's the waterfall approach. And that's what we go through. Well, back in time, what we did was called a big upfront design. It is a big upfront design, meaning we would design the heck out of everything. And then we will come back and start implementing it. Well, I got some good news for you. We are doing agile right now. So what does that mean? No design. This is awesome, right? Forget all those good things we can ever do. Just start coding. And you say, but I don't know what the requirements are. don't worry, we are agile, they tell us. This is halfway to stupidity, isn't it? So this is like a pendulum. It's a very dangerous pendulum. One extreme where we design everything. On the other extreme where we design nothing. And both extremes are really dangerous. What we need is a balance. If you look at big upfront design, so I'm going to say bad idea, of course, just in case. But the point really is, if you look at the big upfront design, what is the bad word in here? The bad word is not design. The bad word is not even upfront. The bad word is the B word, big. What if we can do enough upfront design, where the team gets together in the beginning of the sprint and pieces out some of the design ideas and talk about how we're going to approach it and do just enough design for the next sprint to move forward. Well, that can give us a better perspective on what we're trying to do. So agile doesn't mean no design. Agile simply means that we don't go off in one direction too far so that it's really hard for us to turn back and come, and we want to really make incremental steps moving towards that. So in that regard, we can try to really approach this evolutionary design by constantly evolving it. So how do we go about doing it? The first principle is keep it simple. Now, keeping things simple has a very big benefit. You know, Einstein said, any intelligent fool can make things complex and violent, but it takes a touch of genius and courage to move in the opposite direction. And he really hit it. He just didn't say it takes a genius, it takes courage. Because when you create simple things, people around you will make fun of you. People around you will tell you, God, that's simple. It cannot be worth it. And they will want you to create complex things. When you create complex things, unfortunately, you gain respect. People look at you and say, this guy is a genius because I don't understand anything he is doing. And this is the sad part of the world we live in. But it takes courage to go in the opposite direction and say, I'm going to create something simple. Because why is it good to create simple things? Simple is easier to understand. Simple is easier to change. Simple is easier to work with. Simple fails less. Simple fails more gracefully. So a lot of these things can help us. When we create something simple, it becomes easier to evolve and extend. When we create something enormously complex, it becomes really hard to change in the future, and that becomes really hard for us to keep up with. But one of the things we should really do is we should constantly refactor the code we create. Refactoring is an extremely important effort we put in. In a way, if you really think about it, no one can sit down and write code the correct way in one setting. We cannot just do that. We have to write code, we understand it better now, we come back and change it, we refactor it, we improve it, and we keep building on it over and over and over. This is one of the reasons in test-driven development we often say red, green, and refactor. You don't have test passing, you write the code to make the test pass, now you need to refactor it. And refactoring helps us to rethink about the design, and a lot of times when we create a design, things are a little bit complex. We can refactor it towards simplicity quite a bit by working with the code. So refactoring is a very important characteristic we do almost continuously in the code. Now when it comes to refactoring, of course, we cannot just do it once and leave it alone. It's a continuous effort as we keep working on the code forever. But when it comes to design, I often ask one question to the team of designers I work with, and that is the question of reversibility. Now, what is reversibility? So the word reversibility is a very important design characteristic. So reversibility is the ability to back out of design decisions. You could even remove the word design. It's an ability to back out of decisions. We all make decisions based on what you know today, at this moment. But later on we realize that was not a very good decision because we know a little bit more now than we did before. So we want to change our decisions. If a decision is reversible, it's easy to change it. If a decision is irreversible, you cannot so easily change it. So when it comes to design, if you give me a design which is reversible, I will make a decision a little bit easily. But if you give me a design decision that's irreversible, I'm not going to make it so quickly. I want to take a little bit more time. I want to wait a little longer. And I want to think a little bit more. I want to discuss a little bit more. Because once I commit to it, I'm going to stick with it because the chance of me reversing is so little. And so when it comes to design, always ask the question, how reversible your design decision is. For example, I want to use a parser to parse JSON data. Oh, I want to use this XYZ parser. Well, great, I use the parser, and tomorrow I decide I don't like that parser. I want to use a different parser. I can remove this parser, put another parser in place, I can move forward. Hey, that's not really that hard, that's reversible. So in general, you could say libraries are generally reversible. So we can use a library today and throw another library tomorrow. But for this factor, one of the things you need to consider is this idea that I like to call as a surface area. So imagine that this is your library. And imagine your code is talking to the library like this. If you want to reverse it, that's a lot of surface area being coupled to it. It's really hard to reverse it. On the other hand, well, okay, that was a coupling right there. On the other hand, if your surface area was really small, now you can see this one is easier to reverse out and replace it. So one of the things to think about when it comes to library is to keep your surface area really minimal. On the other hand, if you think about a framework, now what about a framework? There's a difference between a framework and a library, isn't it? You use a library, a framework grows around you, and the framework will encompass your code, and you get locked in. And 2 years from now you say, I don't like that framework. Well, good luck. Because you may like the framework today, you may dislike the framework tomorrow. But the framework is not going to let you go, right? You get locked in. So frameworks are generally hard to reverse out. Similarly, languages. So if you have a project which is written in Java, and I come to you and say, I've got a great idea. You should rewrite your entire code in Python. You're going to throw me out of this door, or through that window even better, right? Because changing the language is expensive. That's not really easy. That's not to say that I cannot mix other languages in my code. But completely rewriting a code base in a different language is just not simply possible. So when it comes to design, there are certain things that are going to be really hard to reverse, and there are going to be things that are relatively easy to reverse. So things that are easier to reverse, you can take those decisions a little lightly. Things that are really hard to reverse, put more effort and time and analysis into it before you commit to it. That is something you have to really do. But one of the other capabilities we are really interested in is this idea called last responsible moment. Now, last responsible moment is an agile practice where we postpone decisions until the time we cannot postpone it anymore. For example, just to give a non-technical example, what time are we going to leave to come here today? Guess what? That's a decision Bruno and I and Elver made yesterday. But, hey Bruno, do you know where we're going to have dinner today? And he shrugs his shoulders and says, I don't know, because that's not important right now. We can have a dinner anywhere we want to, and 15 minutes before we can make the decision. Making the decision right now where to have a dinner is pretty pointless because we don't even know what time we'll be wrapping up tonight. So in other words, when it's expensive later on to change it, you want to make the decision early on. When it's not expensive to change it, you want to postpone it. Like getting a flight ticket. I always get it early because the flight ticket is expensive later on. Booking a hotel, I usually wait a little longer. Similarly, when it comes to design, you want to ask the question, is it going to be expensive to do it later than now? If the cost is about the same, postpone it. Wait a minute, why should I postpone it if I can do it now? And the reason is actually extremely simple. So let's think about this. We are smarter today than we were yesterday. Does anyone not agree with that? Right? Everybody, I hope, will agree, right? We are smarter today than we were yesterday. But why? Because we know more things today than we did yesterday. Our context is better, things are a little bit more clearer, we got more answers to the questions we asked for. So if I had something I could do yesterday, or I could do it today, and if it can wait, I would rather wait till today than do it yesterday. Well, if you can postpone things, it also gives you time. How many times you hear this on projects? People often tell you, I don't have time, I don't have time. Well, guess what? If you don't have time, quit doing so many things. By reducing what you do, you have more time to do things, rather than rushing through all of that very quickly. Well, obviously the question is, if you're going to deal with the last responsible moment, are there risks in it? And honestly, I didn't realize this in the beginning, but I'll share with you an experience about this. I wanted to work on a software project. I had exactly 6 months to work on this project. It was a time-based project. I had all the luxury of changing the scope of the project. I can do as much as I wanted to in the order of priority I talked about. So when I sat down to write the project the very first day, it's a foregone conclusion that I need a database for this project. But what database can I use to really build it? And the answer is, I don't know. I could be using any of the databases out there. And for all the databases that are available, I decided to use SQLite 3. SQLite 3 is a file-based database. Nobody in the right mind would use that in production. And exactly that's what I used. Why? For 2 reasons. One, I knew my schema is going to change a lot in the next 6 months. And every time I change my schema, I don't want to sit there and fiddle with the database. I want to blow it away and recreate it within a heartbeat. Second, I really didn't know where I would deploy the project. I knew that I have to deploy it on the cloud, but I didn't know what cloud I'm going to choose. Depending on the cloud service I choose, the database available to me will change, and the pricing will decide what database I would use. Because these were unknowns, I quietly left out that idea and started using SQLite 3. A good 4 months went by, and by this time I had written a lot of tests and a lot of code with that database in place. And then one morning I woke up and said to myself, oh my goodness, I'm at the end of the 5th month now, and I got 30 days before I put this code in production. And if I don't really decide a database, I'm going to be in trouble with this. So what do? I better decide. And I said to myself, this is the last responsible moment. And honestly, I came to work panicked that day, because what if things go wrong? And I had researched, I found out what database I'm going to use, because by the time I knew what cloud service I'm going to deploy it on, all that information was ready for me and available. And when I came to work that morning, I ran all my tests, and every single test, I had thousands and thousands of tests, all the tests passed. And then I made the change to the configuration and said, rather than point to the database I will use in production, the type of the database. And I ran my tests, and to my shock, 3 tests failed of all the tests. That moment when 3 tests failed is called the moment of panic. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it doesn't work, what do I do? Mom, I need help. And I'll be honest about it. I didn't know why it went wrong. And all I did was copy the error, pasted it on Google, And the very first entry in Stack Overflow said, if you get this error, that means your field is defined as this type, but it should be that type. I'm like, I can handle that. I rolled back the change to the configuration, reran all the tests with SQLite passing, modified the schema one more time, reran all the tests passed with SQLite 3, configured again to use the production type database, reran all the tests passed now, committed the change, never looked back again. But it took me a while to realize that. Yes, this is an example of a last responsible moment, but I didn't realize there was one more thing that really helped me. You can ask me, what are those 3 tests that failed? The 3 tests that failed were not in one of those pages that a user will use when they start using the application. This would be something they would get to maybe in a few weeks to a few months after they start using the application. Now, can you imagine that I did not have these automated tests? Imagine I only had manual verification where I will go through every page, enter data. I'm going to get tired doing it. And so what am I going to do? I'm going to try out a few important pages and say, hey, this all worked, let's ship it. I will hope that the rest of the things work. And the application will be in production without something being tested. And what is that called? A ticking time bomb, isn't it? Because on that fateful morning, a user eventually hits that page and the code is going to blow up with an error in the database layer. How shameful that would be and how expensive would it be? And then I realized, oh my goodness, when we talk about last responsible moment, it cannot happen just by itself. Imagine you work in a company where they only do manual verification, where everybody is just typing things, clicking on buttons and saying, yeah, that worked yesterday, now it's working, but I'm tired, I'll come back tomorrow and try a few more pages. And in that company, you come 1 month before and say, hey, I got a great idea. We postpone using the real database, we're going to switch it now. And all the testers will look at you and say, are you crazy? Because if you change something as fundamental like that, we need 4 more months to do testing. Manual testing cannot sustain agility. So when we talk about really the last responsible moment, we really cannot do this without other good practices. One of them is having automated testing, very fast feedback loops. If you don't have a fast feedback loop, you're better off making decisions early because it's expensive and error prone to make those decisions later on. So it turns out that these practices don't work in isolation. We have to really bring them together. One of the other things related to that is the YAGNI principle. YAGNI stands for you aren't going to need it. So essentially this is needed. So how many times we implement features that really are not necessary? We do this all the time. Because as we are writing this code, right in the middle of it, we say, oh, let me take out this other edge case. And we implement that code. And very quickly we realize this code is loaded up with so many things. The other day I was doing a code review. This particular programmer had taken a time to do error checking on a data. In theory, this made really good sense because these are possible values for this data. And I emailed the developer and said, can you tell me when this condition will occur? And the programmer said, it will not happen ever. Well, it will not happen ever. Why do you write the code to handle that situation? And he said, what if ever happens? Well, no, it will never happen. Because practically in this application, that's not going to happen. Why are we writing code for it? So what if we can postpone writing a piece of code because we don't need it until we clearly know we need it? And if we do this, suddenly our code is not really that big and bloated. And hands down, the code with the fewest bugs is the one you never wrote. Because if you ever write a piece of code that becomes your liability, you have to maintain it. And if you ever not want to fix a line of bug in a code, I'll tell you the best way to do it. Don't write it. Because you never have to support what you don't write. So keep the code absolutely minimum so you don't have to write that much code at all. Well, wait a minute, what about extensibility though? Don't we want to make the code extensible? Well, sure, we want to make the code extensible, but what is extensibility? That's really hard. Because extensibility is where a piece of code which does something today can also do something different tomorrow without making a lot of change to it. That's what extensibility is. But how do you really know what to make extensible? Remember, we're knowledge workers. We need to know what we're doing. Now, on a project, there are 3 kinds of people. I hope you will agree with this. There are 3 kinds of people on every single project. The first kind, those who know the domain well, but know nothing about software development. We call them the domain experts, isn't it? These domain experts know what product they are building. They will tell you about the financial transactions. They'll tell you about taxation. They'll tell you about the rules and the law and all of that. But they don't know anything about writing code. Maybe they took a full-time course back in school and they think they are development experts, right? And they don't know anything about software development. The second group is those who know software development well, but nothing about the domain. Who are these people? They're called the programmers, right? We can write code all day and all night. We don't know what domain it is. And the domain experts tell us stuff, we kind of listen to it, and we code it away. Then comes along the third group of people. Those who know the domain and the software development really well. These people are very few in companies. In fact, when you have them working in your companies, you will clearly know who they are. You're sitting in a room, you turn off the light, these are the people who glow in the dark. That's how you know who these people are. We will politely ignore this 4th category, right? So, given that, we have 3 categories of people working in companies. Who can make really good decision about extensibility? I would argue it is these few people, right? Because they understand the constraints of software development and the domain at the same time. But these are very few people in the company. So most of the time, most of the teams have these 2 groups of people. Some people who know what software development constraints are, some people who know what domain restrictions and realization is. We got to come together to make the software extensible. And if we don't collaborate with each other constantly, it's almost impossible to create the software that we want to make it extensible. And if we try to make it extensible without that knowledge, it becomes a theoretical extension. And when the real extension comes through, the code we wrote already makes it really hard to extend the code for doing what it's supposed to do, and that becomes unnecessary complexity in the software. So extensibility is a very dangerous double-edged sword. You can use it for power, but you can also use it to inflict wound on yourself. You have to be very careful about it. So as a result, we have to be very cautious about creating software that's actually extensible as we move forward. Well, that brings the question, how do we really create code and design that's easier to change? And this is one of my favorite practices. It's called parsimony. So what is parsimony? Parsimony is minimalistic design. Minimalistic design, you don't do anything that's unnecessary. You keep things as little as possible. That guy on projects will keep asking you the question all the time. Why do you need that class? Why do you need that interface? Why do you need that library? Do it less, do it less, do it less. Because if you can do it with less, it becomes easier to change it. If you have more, it becomes really hard to change it. So parsimony is a very important characteristic or practice to really improve upon the design of the software as we create it. Ken Beck talks about a concept called triangulation. So what is triangulation? Triangulation is where you don't create abstractions or hierarchy or interfaces in the beginning. So what we normally do? We come up with a design idea. We say, here's a base class or an interface. Then we create class 1, and we create a class 2 to implement it, and so on. And once you've thought about this design, what do programmers do? They go to their desk, and they start writing the interface or the base class. If they start writing the interface or the base class, what happens is they are writing this abstraction before really creating any implementation. And as a result, what happens? When you create this implementation, 3-4 weeks from now, or a few months from now, you realize that when you create a new implementation, it doesn't fit into what you really want. And that becomes really hard to extend the code even further. So one of the things to do really is, this is a great idea, a nice design, but don't implement it yet. So what you do instead is, you start by implementing the first class you want to implement. Let it sit around, write tests on it, start using it, play with it, and maybe a few weeks to a few months goes by. And then you realize, oh, I need a variation of this. Go ahead and create a class 2 at this point. When you create a class 2, you're able to really see how similar the class 2 is to class 1 and how different it really is. But of course, you may look at this and say, all right, now that we created this, what do we do? Now look at what's common, and now you extract from this the commonality in here. So this is the first step. This is the second step. Then we create the base over here as the third step to move what's common from these two up. Now you may wonder, if you're writing class 1 first, and then you come to write class 2, are you not duplicating your code between class 1 and class 2? Yeah. But wait a minute, isn't duplication really bad? Only if others see it. So don't show it to anyone. Write it, let the duplication be there, and before you could really show it to somebody else, refactor it to the base class. But by doing it, you are really focusing on what's absolutely essential, and you're pulling what's common up into the base class, and it can save quite a bit of effort for you. This leads to one other thing, which is the Apostles' Law. And the Apostles' Law says that be generous about what you receive and be conservative about what you send. Now, this was created way back in time when we were in the face of the Internet protocol. Now, think about this for a minute. The Internet has been around for a good 40 years now. We got new types of devices being added every single day, and new machines, and new protocols, and yet all of them are able to communicate with each other. How? Well, the Apostles' Law says, be very generous about what you receive. Don't bother rigorously checking every part of the message you get. Focus on the part you care about and leave the rest of the payload alone for other participants in the process to take care of. Be conservative about what you send. Don't try to send what's really not required and be sensitive to what you send. This can apply to interface design as well. If a function you are creating receives a class, let's say, for example, let's say you have an inventory which is receiving an array list of books, and we will call this as books. If you look at this, what can I send to this inventory? Oh, you can send an array list. He protests. He says, I don't have an array list. I have a linked list. What do? Oh, tough luck. You cannot send it to me. How sad, isn't it? Oh, let's fix it. Let's say inventory, and I'm going to take a list of book over here, and I'll call this as books. And he's very happy. Look at the smile on his face, right? He's like, this is great. I can send a linked list. He can send you an array list. Everything works fine. But she is not very happy right now. Because she says, I don't have a linked list. I don't have an array list. I have a set with me. Oh dear. You can convert your set to a list and send it to me. She's not happy, right? She's like, no, I don't want to waste my time doing that. Oh, here's an idea. What if I were to take instead an inventory iterator of book? So if I send you an iterator of book, now just what happened? You can send me a linked list because it's got an iterator. You can send me a array list, it's got an iterator, and you can send me a set as well because it's got an iterator also. So by designing the interface to an abstraction, we can make the code a lot more flexible. This is being generous in what we receive. Or moving forward, you can also say, for example, stream of book. This is in Java 8, and you can receive a stream because after all, a stream is just an iterator, isn't it? So this gives you a lot more flexibility in terms of doing that. But don't we all want to create something that is reusable? Well, sure, that'll be nice. But the problem really is the following. Well, to use, something has to be specific. To reuse, something has to be general. So the question is, how do you create something that is specific and general at the same time? It turns out, if you create something for the purpose of reuse, it ends up being not even usable. And it becomes a complete waste. I can't tell you how many projects and libraries have failed because people wanted to create something reusable before they ever created something usable. Grady Booth once said, create something usable and do it several times over, and then eventually it can become reusable. So don't have the urge to create a reusable software in the beginning. Reuse comes from a lot of repetitive use, and every time you use it, you refactor it into something that eventually becomes reusable. You say, is that even possible? Well, not only is it possible, that's what has been done for the most successful frameworks that are out there. How many of you use EJB 1.0? Not anybody, right? Why? Because nobody used it. And they sat down and said, let's create something reusable. And that was a disaster. What happened to Spring? They didn't sit there and create Spring. Rod Johnson went around, started using Java and POJOs, like Java objects. And he started devising ways and said, hey, that seems to work. And he went on to a second project, a third project, a fourth project. And every project he went to, he started refactoring it, and one day came out Spring from it. That's exactly how Ruby on Rails was created. They never sat down to create Ruby on Rails. They started using Ruby, that little known language back in time. And they started using on several projects, and they started refactoring it, and out came the Rails framework from it. So from active, multiple use, you can arrive at a reusable software. If you start with reuse, you end up with abuse. But you start with use, you can end with reuse. And that is one of the things, don't be too eager or fast in doing. The last thing I will mention to you really quickly here is something that is near and dear to me, and that is minimized libraries and frameworks. This is so true in the world we live in today. Because if you look at the world we live in today, we are dealing with enormous amount of dependencies. You don't even know how many dependencies a product has. And it's scary, isn't it? And you're going to make a change to it. And before you can get to what you want to do, you got to deal with these hundreds of dependencies around you. And that can be really, really hard. This is especially true today in JavaScript world, for example. The other day I was working with the team, and the developer told me, oh, we quit running all these tests on this project. I said, why did you quit running it? He said, because we upgraded some of the libraries we are using, and the test quit running, so we quit running the test. And I asked him, how many libraries are you using on this project? He said we use 150 libraries. I said, on this project, 150. He said, uh-huh. And he showed me the dependency file. And I asked him, why are we using so many dependencies? He kind of shrugged and said, because we found them. That is so true today, isn't it? People just, you go to lunch. You're having lunch with a group. While you're eating with your colleagues, somebody in the next table say, we're using this XYZ library in JavaScript. You look at your colleague and say, do you know about this XYZ library? And with shame, your colleague says, never heard of it. 13 minutes after lunch, it's integrated and it's in production, isn't it? Because how could you not use another library you heard about? And this is crazy. By going in this direction, we are making things really hard on ourselves. Remember the law of parsimony, be minimalistic. That not only applies to code, that applies to dependencies as well. Dependencies are important, but you don't want too many of them, because that makes your life really, really hard. You want to minimize it. So to summarize what we talked about, you definitely want to evolve your architecture. We talked about the risk of evolving and the risk of not evolving also. We talked about some practices that can help us to minimize the cost of evolving and the risk of evolving as well. But these are things we have to practice. Much like everything else in our lives, we just don't read something and get good at it. We read about something, we try it, we make mistakes doing it, and then we learn from those mistakes and we get better as we go on. But this is also an opportunity for us to work with our team, where we can have the team members try out different ideas and talk about reversibility when we sit down and say, hey, the decision you're making, how reversible is it? Is it expensive to reverse or easy to reverse? And based on that, you can make your decisions. And if you want to postpone decisions, it's a good idea. Make sure that you have a thoroughly good feedback loop available so that it becomes less risky to postpone it to a later time and you can evolve from it. And when it comes to things like accessibility, try to really learn about the real needs of the application before arbitrarily making it to be extensible or instead of that. And that can be really easy to evolve the application as well. That's all I have. Hope that was useful. Thank you. We'd be delighted to answer any of your questions or comments.
Pessoal, se não precisar de tradução para as perguntas, não vai fazer nada.
Yes, please.
I will try in English.
I can already understand it. Go for it.
So when you talk about refactor, we are talking about change the code without changing the behavior of the code. Okay? So to make sure you don't change the behavior, you create automated tests. So you run the test before, change something, run the test again, and check everything's okay. So the refactor. Is there tools to refactor architecture docs? So some way to, if I remove a library, so is there some technique to make sure what I remove is not break my code? I don't know if there is some literature, there is some books, some blog posts about this kind of subject.
Well, sure, there are several, but really, what it comes down to, what you're saying in those words, is the word called feedback, right? That's what you're really asking for.
Yes.
I made a change. Do things that worked before, do they continue to work still? That's the question you were asking. There are several forms of feedback. If you're using a language like Java or any statically that language, the compiler gives you a feedback right away, isn't it? Because your code depends on something that doesn't exist anymore. Your code doesn't compile anymore. That's a feedback. I'm not saying that's excellent feedback or the only feedback, but that's still a feedback. But then if the code doesn't compile, I already know it doesn't compile, I can fix it. But a lot of times, it may not be a code level dependence, because what if I'm in the world of microservices, and I remove one of the services which no longer exists? My application throws a message on a message tier, and the message vanishes, nothing happens, right? So when you start designing your application, you have to design it with the feedback loop in mind. So I'm sending off a message to a service. The service is taking way too long to respond. I need to know to go back and verify it, and that should generate a response back to say that, hey, this is gone. Somebody's got to take care of what's going on here. Check on that service. So this comes through two forms. One is through automated testing, but not just automated testing alone. You also need to have built into the system the safeguards for this as well. Then there are other things you need to be worried about, right? It's not just a question of removing services, but it could be an issue of scale. You may have suddenly more requests than you can handle. Is something that cannot handle the load. Again, a feedback loop comes in. So in other words, systems have to be built with monitoring in it. So a healthy, it depends on the scale of the system. If it's a large application that needs to support critical business, the system should have monitoring built into it. So I can look at the system at any point and say, what is the throughput of the system? How are things working through it? As an example, one of the things people are doing today is from time to time, let's take an example. Let's say I have a student processing system. They can register for classes, pay for services on campus, whatever that could be. But that's built as a microservice. And you got John Doe as a student, and you introduce the student in the system here, and maybe the person you want to know how much this person has used cafeteria and what bill you should generate, right? Well, in this system, what you can do is from the ground up when you're designing, you can design the system to say, I'm going to have special IDs that are not real students, but they are fake. But as they walk through the system, there's logs that get generated. So you can send them here, wait for a little bit, and see them come out on the other side, and you can look at all the logs and visualize it and say, yeah, everything is working because it went through the system. In a way, if you really think about it, I know this is not a really fun example to give, but we all go through this in our lives. There's a time I had some trouble with me, so I had to go to the doctor, and they inject a chemical into your bloodstream. And as the chemical goes through your blood, they are seeing your circulation on the monitor. And eventually, of course, a few hours later, that kind of comes out, but that gave an ability for the doctors to take a look at you inside without really, intruding into the person. That's kind of what we can build as well. If doctors can do that on human body, we can do that on the lifeless machines that we build and work with. So these kind of feedback mechanisms can help a great deal. So compilers, automated testing, and having such mechanisms can help us as well. Please.
Regarding the PowerPoint architecture that you mentioned, in companies very common to have like few architects and most of them being this kind of also called ivory tower architects. Is there any advice for because usually they focus on several projects, and for them to focus on code they should focus only in one project, or like how to split the time, or any advice on that?
No, that's a really good question. I'll answer the question with an example. I was sitting in a flight, and I turned to the guy next to me, had a small car, and I said, hey, he said, hi, what are you doing? And then I asked him, what do you do for a living? And he said, I'm an architect. And I looked at him and said, pardon me, are you a real architect? That's what I asked him. He kind of smiled at me and said, what do you mean a real architect? I said, I work in the software field. We use the word architect. We are called software architects. Are you a software architect? He said, no, I'm a real architect. Well, so he works in civil engineering. And then I asked him, what does he do? And he said, I'm working with this hospital we're building. This is a project that's been going on for a few years now. And I looked at him and my face changed color when he said that. And then he looked at me and said, I know what you're thinking. I said, what was I thinking? And he said, I said I'm an architect, and then I said I'm working there for a few years. I know what you're thinking, because architects come in the beginning and they leave, isn't it? And I'm like, yeah. He said, I'm not that kind of architect. And he went on to say, I stay with the project from the start to the finish, because even in civil engineering, there are surprises that come about. You know, I live in the state of Colorado, and we live in the mountains. And we could have a very poor soil in a place that you may not even know until you start digging into it. People have taken samples, all the theory and the surveys are all really good, but you never know what surprise you come up with. And then he would say, now I have to go to the people who are building the hospital and tell them, this is not going to work. We got to change the architecture because we got a huge constraint on the soil and other things like that. And that got me thinking, that's the quality of a good architect, right? So if I want to spread myself thin and I want to work on 7 projects, keep in mind, I'm going to be less effective on every single one of them. On the other hand, I can come to you and say, I will be an architect on your product, but I'm not going to make all the decisions for you. I'm going to work with your team, and we are collectively going to create the architecture in a way that very soon my dependency on me in the team will be less and less, because the team becomes smarter and smarter to make the decisions. And that is the characteristics of a good architect. This goes to the individual, it goes to the team, and goes to the company. And this goes to the culture. If we have a culture to promote bad practices, the result will be bad practices and a poor result. But if we have a culture where we promote good practices, then we get better results, because we find people with the kind of the desires and who are really going to work towards making those results as well. So this is 2 things, right? What can we seek for our own team? But all of us, at one point, we're going to grow into that position, into a lead position or architect position. And at that point, we have to ask ourselves, is my desire to boss around multiple teams, or is my desire to really excel in one team and create a beautiful architecture for them to implement a product and use that experience to be successful in a lot of other places? That's something we have to weigh for ourselves. Please.
Do you think the architectural refactoring is domain independent? And is there some way to automate the architectural refactoring?
So the question is, can we omit architectural refactoring? You can't, because we live in a world of change in requirements and change in the environments and change in the surroundings. We also learn a great deal from what we do. So that is something that's got to happen almost continuously. There are techniques to make this happen, actually. One of them is called the trace and bullet approach. The trace and bullet approach is based on hunters going to hunt. They could do the math and fire at a moving target, maybe a deer, and expect to hit it. If you are moving and the target is moving, it's incredibly hard to get it right. Well, the trace and bullets are, when you fire the gun, there's a little trace that shows you where it's going. So using the beautiful tool of the human feedback cycle in the brain, we can change the directions and hit the targets. This idea comes to architecture. So when you devise the initial architectural draft, rather than building all the parts, you put stubs and marks for different parts, and you exercise your application through the marks, and you wait until you know more to evolve these parts. So in other words, you give an opportunity for the architecture to grow in and kind of realign and refactor along the way, and you make changes. But by doing this, you also build in a way that tomorrow, if you decide to refactor it, it becomes a lot easier. in a way, you could even say microservice architecture is something that's a lot more easier to refactor if you think about it, right? Because these services can be replaced with different services, some of them may be decommissioned if needed, so it lends itself for much better architectural refactoring than a monolith itself, but even in a monolith you can design things for to a certain degree to be able to do that. So rather than avoiding it, we should actually work towards enabling it, because the nature of what we do is change all the time. If somebody tells you, we wrote an application, but we never had to change it, what they're telling you, their project got cancelled, nobody's using it, right? Anything relevant has to change over time, and we should make the change affordable. Thank you.